everybody. So, just very quickly want to pop on and go over a little bit of review for the honors classes. You guys have your quiz coming up tomorrow for period 1, and was it next Monday for period 3? Something along those lines. And I did say that I would be on, and so here I am doing a quick little review. So let's get right down to it. I think the worksheet that I gave you guys is slightly different from the one I have on here. I cannot get to files that are saved on the school computers. I used to be able to. Now if I don't save them to Google, then I don't have access to them when I go home. So I did not save them to Google. But this is very close, and I do have the physical copy of your review sheet here with me, so I'm going to use it, even though this looks slightly different. So number 1 is basically the same exact question. Levels of organization. You want to go from atoms to biosphere. So atom is the smallest possible. That's like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Those are all atoms. Excuse me. Then there's molecules, which we're going to learn about next. Molecules are things like protein and carbohydrates. You've heard of those before. DNA is a molecule, so those are some examples. Then it's organelles. We just learned a little bit about organelles, cells, tissues, organs and organ systems, which you guys have just done a ton of organ and organ system stuff. Then organism, population, community. Community is every living thing in an area. Ecosystem, all the living and non-living things. Biosphere, any area on Earth that could support life. So that's it. That's number 1. Number 2, homeostasis, response, and stimuli. And be able to discuss the relationship between each. Okay. Homeostasis, maintaining stable internal conditions. Temperature is a great example. We also had the homeostasis lab, the pulse. Your pulse is a great example of homeostasis, that you got to maintain your heart rate. Depending on how much exercise you're doing, that will determine your. And I just now realized, I hope that the volume is working on this thing, because if not, then I'm wasting my time. Let me see. Okay, good. It's working. So, where was I? I cut myself off. Yeah, so pulse, great example. If you're moving around a lot, it means you got to get blood pumping because your muscles need more oxygen and nutrients, which is in your blood, and so your heart's got to pump faster. As soon as you stop working out, then the heart rate's going to decrease because you don't need to pump as much. Response, that's a reaction that you have, usually to information, a stimuli. A stimuli is information that causes a reaction. So for instance, pupil lab, the stimulus was the light, and response was your pupil should have shrunk. Relationship between each, oftentimes a stimulus, like more exercise, for instance, can cause a response, like your heart rate increasing or decreasing. And I'm looking at my thing here, and it's got my mouse cursor blinking like crazy. How do I make this full screen? Full screen. That's not what I want. Go back. Full screen. Come on, how to make this full screen? That way it's not doing that. I feel like it's like gonna freak out and break something if I leave it like that. How come it doesn't let me fix this? Ugh. Projector. I have no idea what that did. It didn't do anything. All right. Anyway, forget it. Hopefully it doesn't mess up the stream or drive anybody insane. Hmm. Now I just tried to zoom in. Ah, it's not working. Nothing I do is working. Okay, whatever. So, just to finish that thought, because I cut myself off, relationship between each, that response you have, like your heart rate changing, that response is usually what's going to help you to maintain homeostasis. So, there's your relationship between all three of them. The stimulus causes the response that will help you to maintain homeostasis. Like, for instance, your heart rate changing in order to maintain your blood flow around the body when you need extra oxygen for your muscles and whatnot. Okay, next. Number 3, body systems. Know the functions of at least 2 systems, how they interact, how they demonstrate the importance of maintaining homeostasis, and an example of a disease or issue where homeostasis can't be maintained. That I leave up to you because that's basically your research. You guys have done a ton of research. You just did a whole model project. So you had to learn about 2 systems, how they interact, learn about how they maintain homeostasis, and one example of a disease and how it could affect your model. So, and know which system controls most others. That's your nervous system. Your nervous system, your brain controls the other organ systems for the most part. So that's all depending on your research. So some of you may want to do cardiovascular and respiratory because you're really familiar with that because you just researched it. Others may want to do immune system and respiratory system because maybe that's the one you did. So that really, I'm not going to go over every single organ system and every possible combination of 2. That would, stream would last like for an hour and a half of me just talking about that. Next, be able to identify the IVDV and controls in both the pupil or pulse lab. Pupil and pulse lab. Independent variable. In the pupil lab, the thing you introduced to cause a response would be the amount of light. The light that goes into the pupil causes the dependent variable is the pupil size changed. Well, pupil size is a dependent variable. Control group, the group in normal light. And for the pulse lab, independent variable, exercise, doing exercise. Dependent variable, depending on exercise, your heart rate changed, and the control group is the group that tested its heart rate at rest. So you guys tested your heart rate while you were sitting, relaxing, then you tested it right after exercise. So the sitting, relaxing, not exercising group, that is your control group. Be able to identify and explain an example of homeostasis from the pupil and pulse lab. So you pick either one of them, talk about what was being balanced. So for instance, the pulse lab, your heart rate was being balanced and blood flow throughout the body to meet the needs of your muscles, which were doing some work, doing some exercise. That was that's an example of what you were maintaining in terms of homeostasis for the pulse lab. Feedback mechanisms. How do they work? How do they help maintain homeostasis? Feedback mechanisms in general. How do I want to word this? My mind just totally went blank on me for a second. I apologize. So feedback mechanism is some type of action causes either that action to happen more and more and more, which would be positive feedback, or it causes that action to happen less and less and less. The action that starts a process can also end that process. So there's a couple of ways that you can say feedback mechanisms, or the beginning is also the end. Feedback loops oftentimes. So that's how they work, is usually you have some kind of stimulus, like say exercise, or maybe even some kind of chemical stimulus or some kind of light stimulus, lots of stimuluses. you could potentially have for all sorts of different reactions. And once that stimulus is, well, the body's going to respond to that stimulus, obviously. And then once that stimulus is taken away, the body, that's more information that the body then has to respond and put things back to normal. So, for example, your heart rate, the stimulus is, again, your exercise, your heartbeat starts going faster, faster, faster. You stop exercising, your body senses that, and it sends all sorts of signals to decrease that process, slow down your heart rate. So it's an example of negative feedback. So what they do is they make sure that your systems and all of your processes stay relatively balanced to meet whatever your body's needs might happen to be. So that's how they help maintain homeostasis in general. I should have scrolled down so that you could actually see the question while I was going over it. But at least I was saying it out loud. So, and now you could see the question. So now you could look at the question and go back. This, don't worry about that. That was last year. You don't have to worry about that. Hierarchy of organization. That's the idea that smaller components like your cells, a whole bunch of cells can work together, and their ability to work together is what helps your larger systems, like your tissues and your organs and your organ systems, to function appropriately. So that's why a small problem with, let's say, your DNA, which is just a molecule, it's much smaller than a cell, that DNA is going to be inside. It's going to be a part of and help make up all of your cells. And so a problem with something small that makes up all the larger systems, that problem is going to compound across every system. So we could go higher than molecules. We could go higher than DNA. We could talk about, for instance, a cell. If your muscle cells are all defective, they have a defective mitochondria, so your muscle cells don't get enough energy, and it causes them to atrophy. So that means all the muscle cells in your body would have that same problem. And so all the organs, like your heart, for instance, that require muscle in order to function appropriately, they're not going to be able to because they have a fundamental flaw. How can something like an organelle? Yeah, okay. So there you go. So you could apply that to organelles as well. And so just use mitochondria as an example. So hopefully that's relatively quick, 13-minute little review. And hopefully some of you see this and maybe it helps you. And if you have questions, you could always leave them on this video too. And I think I might be able to get the notifications for that if I see questions in the comment section on the video. All right, so that's it. Peace out.